All right. We got it. How's everyone doing tonight? You doing good? Yes. Yes, thank you for the keynote on the screen. So good. So I'm going to break a rule of public speaking as I kick things off tonight. Zach went, oh gosh. And you're in the front row. You were in the splash zone, my friend. In the splash zone. I'm going to break a rule of public speaking. They always tell you in public speaking, no matter what, you never, ever tell people that you're not prepared, right? Because they don't know. They don't know that you're not prepared. But fun story, and Pastor Zach asked me to share this with you. I just found out a couple hours ago that I was doing this. So have any of you been there before where you find out? And just so you guys know, there's no story behind the story. Pastor Zach's okay. Nothing's wrong. Everything's good. Just got caught up in a little bit of a bind. So here I am, get to share with you, which I'm super excited about. But they tell you never to tell you that. But here's what's really funny about all of this. My phone rang this afternoon, and it came up, Zach Blair, on my caller ID. I got to get a better picture for him or something to make it fun. But it came up, and I answered the phone, and I was like, you're stuck, and you're not going to make it. He was like, how did you know? And I just started laughing. I'm like, you are not going to believe this. Last night, I had this crazy, crazy dream. And in the dream, it had that Miss School homework vibe. But in this dream, the whole time I'm dreaming that I'm supposed to be preparing a message while the worship team is on stage. It was a terrible, terrible dream. I'm backstage. I'm trying to listen what's going on the stage. Are they done yet? Do I have to be up there? And I'm trying to look up Bible verses and figure out these notes that I'm supposed to be. And it was terrible. And I literally woke up at one point and I was like, oh, thank God, it was just a dream. And then I fell asleep and I started dreaming again, which never happens. And I was really, when I woke up, it was oh man, that was intense. And then shortly thereafter, I get a phone call. So of course, when he calls, and it's been really cool because Pastor Zach's been on a journey with me. That's actually something God's been growing in me, is speaking to me in dreams, which obviously I'm not fully, aware of how all that works. I'm still learning, but he's speaking to me, and here I am, sharing with you guys tonight. So how about that? It was a really funny moment. I did laugh with him on the phone for a while. He was like, oh my gosh, you've got to share that tonight. So broke the rule, tell you I'm not prepared, but I've been working on it. Been praying, get to share with you. I got his notes. I couldn't decipher any of it. No, I'm just kidding. It's good. It's good. So just want to share with you guys, continuing on from what we kicked off on last week. And tonight is called Faith to Finish. Faith to Finish. So that's where we're going tonight. I got a few things, a few scriptures, but I want to kick off and read this for you. And this is Matthew 14, starting in verse 30. But I want to set this up for you. This is where Jesus was with his disciples, with his followers, and he actually withdrew from the crowd for a little bit. Jesus went up on the mountain to pray. The disciples went ahead and got in the boat, and they were heading on the water. Some of you may know the story that the storm came, the waves were whipping up pretty good, and all of a sudden they see Jesus walking on the water towards them. And they freak out because they think it's a ghost. And I like to think, in my mind, I have the Brian translation. I like to think he messed with them a little bit. I don't know. I definitely would. And they're like, oh, it's a ghost. And then and then he said, do not be afraid. But at first he'd been like, woo, making ghost noise, messing with them in some way. He's got to. It's pretty amazing. But then they see it's him. And you might know the story. Peter's like, Jesus is walking on the water. Call me out there, buddy. I am there. I want to walk on that water too. I love his tenacity, his attitude. And everyone else is sitting there freaking out thinking it's a ghost. And he's the only one Jesus out there on the water. I want to do that too. That looks cool. That looks amazing. Some of you know some people like that. Or you might have a kid like that. They'd be the one jumping out of the boat to walk on the water too. And you'd be like, get back here. So this is what happens. He steps out. And then we'll pick up in verse 30, it says, but when he saw the wind, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took a hold of him, saying, oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt? And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshiped him, saying, truly you are the Son of God. Pretty amazing thing, and it's pretty awesome here. We see this, and maybe you've been familiar with this story. It's a pretty common one. We know this, and so many of the antics of Peter and the things that he's doing with Jesus, and just love this, that he had this moment of great faith, because it takes some faith to step out of a boat. Come on, someone. It takes some faith. You're not just doing that. Like, had he seen anyone do this before? Like, what went through his mind that he decided to attempt this? Like, it's just some really big faith to see Jesus and say, well, if Jesus went out there on this water and he's walking on it, call me out. I want to walk on this water too. This is amazing. Probably just because he'd have like the greatest bragging rights in Galilee. Guys, you were not going to believe what I did. And they talk about a fishing story. He's a fisherman. He's like, I walked on the water. Maybe it was like for the ladies. Ladies, you're not going to believe. But he walked on the water, and then he began to sink, and then he looks at Jesus and he cries out, what? Save me. And does Jesus like abandon him and be like, you should have had more faith? Man, no, he goes and he reaches out for me, he calls him out, and he reaches out, pulls him in, they get back in the boat, and I had to imagine it just had to be an amazing moment for all of them, probably a little bit stunned, a little bit shocked, a little scared. They thought it was a ghost and it's Jesus, and then one of their friends decides to get out and walk with them, and they have this incredible moment, and then they just worship God. They're like, truly, you are this. So you've got the goods, you backed it up, you are who you say you are. You just walked on water. That is not normal. But here's the thing that we're going to talk about tonight. That maybe like Peter, were you ever convinced that God called you to something, but now you've deemed it to be impossible? Maybe like Peter, you felt like at some point God had called you something personally in your life, a dream, a relationship, a marriage, something, anything, something that God had called you to, but now when you look at it, you would deem it and say, that's kind of impossible. I don't know about that. And maybe just like Peter, we say that we got our eyes off of the faith and off of Jesus. Because what did he do? He began to look at the waves, probably freaked out a little moment, probably a little moment of that faith wavering and being like, oh, I'm actually out of the boat walking on water right now. And then he began to say, this obstacle, I don't, oh, just kidding. I can't do this. Jesus, save me. And do we do this in our own life with the things that we were so convinced, just like we were so convinced that I can walk, so convinced I can do this impossible thing if I keep my eyes on Jesus, if it's all about the faith, but instead I take my eyes off of him. And I don't know about you, friends, I have done this many times. Oh, so many times. We could just have a story. We'll bring the couch over here and Brian will lay down and we'll have like a counseling moment. And I'll tell you, it all started so many years ago. There's so many times where I was like, I'm going to do this. I mean, it doesn't even, like, so many times I think we just go to, like, the big thing, like, God, like, you know, I do ministry, and God called me to be a pastor, or God called me to plant a church, and we did that whole thing. We think of all these big things that we have faith, but I think sometimes even in some of the things that aren't just these big ministry calling moments, but even, like, in my marriage, we're like, I'm pretty confident God called and put Christy and I together in this marriage, but I'm going to tell you something. It's really easy to get my eyes off of Jesus and the faith instead of the obstacle and look at the craziness going on in our life, and just begin to be like, this is kind of impossible. Like, I'm kind of understanding why this doesn't always work out. This is really, really hard. But instead refocusing my eyes not on myself. And I love this, something Christy taught me years ago, is like you can look inward or you can look up, right? You can keep your eyes all on your situation, the circumstance, the obstacle, or you can take a look and keep your eyes on Jesus, because that's really where the faith comes from. Peter's faith wasn't in himself, that he just built up this incredible faith that he was going to step out of a boat. He saw Jesus and put his eyes on him, and that's what enabled him to step out, is the faith that he had in Jesus, because he was doing it and he was modeling it. And then what does Jesus say to him? I love this. I mean, Jesus just had to have been proud. It's like a proud dad moment. I mean, if you have kids and you feel like, and especially in the younger phase, like they don't know what they're doing. Like they're just like, oh man, especially our second Lily, that kid constantly was bruised and bloodied. And it's just like, because she was always trying to do things way before she's ready. She had an older sister. She's going to watch her, and I'm going to climb the stairs, and I'm going to do this, and I'm not going to be left behind, and constantly bumping her head, constantly falling over. And it's not like a, shh, stupid kid, aren't you going to learn to walk? No, not at all, right? It's just like exciting. I imagine Jesus had to feel this towards Peter as he saw him step out, but he says this to him. He says, oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt? And I don't really think that was much of a rebuke as much of it was an encouragement. Your little faith, why did you doubt? And I think this is important, because when we talk about little, does it mean he had like less, or he didn't have enough faith, or if you just like mustered up enough and be like, I got the faith, I can do this? No. And I think the first point is this, is that little is actually little enduring faith. That he was telling him that it wasn't just zone. Thank you. Got my back. The thorny soil, right? And then when it started to grow, the thorns just come in, strangle it, it's not going to grow. And then finally, the fourth soil was the good soil, right? And then finally, that was the seed that produced. Only 25% of the seed went to the first three, didn't make it 75%, just the last one, the endurance, to make it. You know what I really love? Sometimes we miss about this parable and this whole idea. I lived in rural Indiana for a while, and lots of agriculture, probably more corn than people. Soy, probably second, right after the corn, still more than people. And sometimes, when they do the agricultural thing, it kind of smells. You know why? Because fertile soil comes from putting something that's really stinky on it. And if you think about this, like the compost and, what, like fertilizer, a lot of times is what? It's, dung, excrement, poop, right? It's really terrible, nasty stuff, but it makes really fertile soil. And I love that idea that a lot of times the things that we go through, the fertile soil, what makes it in our life is because of the difficult. It is the hard thing. It is the thing that would just seem repulsive, but it's what stirs up that soil and gives it the nutrients, that gives it that faith, the endurance to be able to grow, only 25%. And so asking the question today, what is it that you have given up on? What is a dream that God's placed in your heart? Perhaps a marriage, a relationship, a goal, a desire. And once again, this isn't like the over-the-top stuff. It's like, well, God called me to be the next Oral Roberts, and I'm going to go, heal the nations. God called me to be, whoever. You just name it. We put like these big things. I'm going to be the next Joyce Meyer and preach the nations into heaven. I think we get this idea, but there's so many things that we just know that God, how about our relationship with God? How about having faith in Him and having a strong, enduring faith? What have you given on? What were you so convinced that God called you to that now you deem impossible? So little enduring faith. And then the next one is there is not more faith, there is just more endurance. Oh, I wish it was the other way. Can I just be honest for a minute? I wish it was just like, if I could just muster up some more faith, but nope. It's not. It's not about having more faith. It's about more endurance. And why do I wish it's the other way? Because endurance is hard. It's work. Endurance is hard. Endurance is work. Endurance is tiring. If endurance was easy, everyone would finish. But because it's not, it's hard. Have you ever heard the saying before? And I totally agree wholeheartedly. Anything worth doing in life is uphill. It is so true. Anything worth doing in life is uphill. It's just going to be work. It doesn't matter what it is. And this is it. There is not more faith. There's just more endurance. In Romans 2, it says that God shows no partiality. God's no respecter of persons. It's not like he's saying, hey, if you just had more faith, or if I gave you more faith, if you could just do this, you would be able to do this. He gives the same measure. Romans 12, he gives the same measure of faith. Paul is telling them this in Romans. And he's not telling them this in a way. He's telling them this because he wants them to know, hey, don't get too prideful. Don't get too arrogant. This is even about the measure of faith that he's giving you like for gifts or gives the Spirit. He's just saying like the amount of faith to get through the day and have a relationship with God. It's the same measure. He's allotted it to us. I remember years ago, any Steak and Shake fans out there? I don't think there's not too many of them around anymore, right? But we used to go to them all the time, especially in college, mostly for the shakes, a little bit for the steaks, but it was mostly, cheeseburgers, delicious. Their fries are really thin, though, really skinny, right? And I know, the paper hats, the whole experience, I mean, it's a thing. Anyone hungry now? Zach, we getting another burger tonight after this? Okay, sweet. I didn't get one last time, but I'm in this time. And I remember one time we went and a friend of mine ordered the cheese fries, which were those skinny little fries, and they had cheese on them. And they bring them out to him, and it was like this emaciated little amount of cheese. I mean, it was like, come on now. I mean, it's like 3 fries were covered. Like, it was really pathetic. And so when the waitress comes back out, he was like, can I get more cheese for this? I think they must have made a mistake. There's not much on this. And she's like, I'm sorry, they use a ladle. And it's the same serving of cheese for every fries. To which he replies, take a look at this picture that you have displayed here. Apparently they had a larger ladle than you have here in your restaurant. Exactly. It didn't go well. We left before anything got spit in. But no, he didn't get any more cheese. That's a true story. Because why? It's the same thing that was measured out. And it's the same thing with our faith. It's that ladle, baby. It's that cheese. It just comes out. It's the same thing every single time. It's allotted to us. It's not that he gives more of faith to one than of the other. The difference maker isn't some special anointing or all the people that we put on pedestals spiritually. We're like, whoa, the pastor, if I could have the faith of Pastor Zach or Pastor Lauren or Ange, oh man, if I could have the faith that Angela Madden has, it would just move mountains, right? Or we just look at all these people that are really just normal, but for some reason we just like to put pastors and preachers and people with a microphone on a pedestal and think that God graced them in some special way, like they've got some special measure, like they got the inside track. It's like, you guys could just all pray with the peasants down here. We got the hotline that goes right to God and just bypass all of your prayers. No, it's not like that at all. It's not like that whatsoever. It's about the endurance to be able to go and do and be able. I know it's ridiculous. Speaking of endurance, this is a really fun story. I think you guys will appreciate this. I went to a school, speaking of Oral Roberts, I went to a school called Oral Roberts University in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And a really big thing, they're all about mind, body, and spirit, the whole person, right? Which sounds so cool and so eloquent on paper until you go to the school and you find out that mind, body, and spirit means that not only are you doing spiritual classes, which you would assume at a Christian university, you'd be learning about God, and you would obviously be learning about things for your mind and education and sharpening it, but then you find out this whole body thing means that now you are doing physical activity the whole time you're at college, and not only that, you're doing it for a grade the entire time you're there. True story. It started out really terrible because they make you do some normal gym things and like exercise, and it was just terrible. But then it gets a little fun because they let you pick. And my girls never believed me, but I took bowling and badminton in college and got college credit for it, right? They let you pick. It was fun. They had equestrian, golf, all that kind of stuff. And then like the really hardcore people were like, I'm doing weightlifting and aerobics. We're like losers. We're playing badminton. Really, it's a true story. But the craziest thing is, and this was a big deal, I don't know if they still do it, they made you do a swim proficiency. This is a true story. And everyone was freaked out about this. This was like the thing at college, like the swim proficiency. Oh, you got to do the swim proficiency. And everyone talked it up so much that it owned me in my head. I'm like, the swim proficiency, I'm not going to be able to graduate. God's called me to pastor, and I'm supposed to be doing these things, but I can't swim. What am I going to do? Like, I'm like thinking, like, I got to be Michael Phelps and like in this pool and like breaststroke, and they're going to be over on the side judging me and be like, oh, Brian can't preach to people because he can't swim. Like, this is in my mind what's going on this whole time. And so finally we wait till like me and my roommate, one of my best friends in college, James. Oh, my boy James. I love him so much. I could write a book on the stories that I have from James. He's from Philly, and he is special, man. He is something else. Ooh, so many stories. And so we're like, finally, we're going to go do this swimming proficiency because it's just owned us this whole time we've been in school. And so we get there, and they're like, all right, in the pool, there's maybe like 10 people there that day because you just sign up and take it at all different times throughout the year. All right, everyone, okay, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to jump in forward, and it's an Olympic-sized pool, and you just have to forward stroke. They don't care if it's doggy paddle halfway through the pool, right? And so I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's not too bad. And you know me, I doggy paddled. Like, I don't have a stroke. Breaststroke, nothing. Like, I swam in a pool as a kid. This is like, this is what I got. I did some Nights In. Remember that? That was our like vacation as a kid. We went to Nights In Motel, and we swam in the pool. Yeah, that's where I learned to swim. And so I'm like just doggy paddling over. And they're like, okay, now you have to jump in backwards, and then you have to like backstroke. But it doesn't matter what it looks like. So you can imagine if there was video. Oh, thank God this was before social media. Thank you, Jesus. And so I make it in. And then the last one, I was like, what? They're like, all right, now we're all going to jump in together as a group, and you have to tread water without touching the side for 10 minutes. I was like, excuse me? They're like, well, you can float. I'm like, I can't float. Like, who did? And there was one of those losers. He's just like, I'm like, oh, come on. He's going to go preach the word of the nations because look at him. He can float, and what am I going to do? And so we get in, and thank God, somebody, the endurance, right? I'm like, how am I going to do this? 10 minutes, that's a long time. And so somebody had this idea, why don't we get in a circle and do the hokey pokey? Why would we do it? So we literally got in a circle. An instructor probably had been like, what are these kids on? And we start doing the hokey pokey. Put your left foot in, put it. And like we just sing it and just totally distracted us and gave me the endurance supernaturally to be able to tread that water for 10 minutes. It's true. I did it. I couldn't believe it. I was like, I'm failing. I'm to come down to my parents. I'm ashamed. I couldn't swim. They're like, what is wrong with you? You can't swim? And I was so nervous. It owns people. And here's how much it was in our head and owned us, and like how much of a nightmare and the horror stories we had heard. My boy James, he gets up to the instructor. We have this little paper that we had to fill out, and they stamp or whatever, and they turn it into the registrar and make sure that you do it. He gets one, and he's like, I need you to do the second copy for me. I need you to sign this one too, and I'm going to hold on to it. And they're like, what, excuse me? Like, yeah, I need you to sign this one too. Oh, and here's my boy Brian. I need you to do the second one for him too. I'm like, no. They're like, no, he needs one too. He needs a second one. And I'm thinking, what do they think? We're going to like sell this thing or whatever? So sure enough, the instructor's like, all right, here you go. I should have saved that. Wouldn't that be a great thing on my wall next to my diploma? Swim proficiency. I did it. I made it. It's true. But that endurance, it's not easy. Could you guys tread water for 10 minutes? I didn't know I could. I found out you might be able to, because I genuinely thought I couldn't do it. Hokey pokey. You just got to be distracted. You got to run the race. Hebrews 12:1. Actually, Hebrews 11 goes through this entire list of these amazing people and all the things they've done. And it's like, and then this person did this for God, and then this person did this. And it's like, it's like the Hall of Fame, Hebrews 11. If you ever need encouragement, read it. Hebrews 11 will just pump you up. It's like, man, look at what all these people did for God. It's amazing. And then Hebrews 12:1 says this. It says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witness to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up. And let us run with endurance the race that God has set before us. I love this. This idea, Hebrews 11, setting up all these amazing things that these men and women have done, all the acts of faith and just amazing things that they did. And I love this idea of this cloud of witnesses, all these people that have gone before, all these people. It's like, I must have this image in my mind of all the saints that have gone before and grandparents, all those people just like cheering us on, this cloud of witness that are saying, you can do this. And why? Because we've got to run the race with endurance. And let's ask this question on this point. Can you trust God when it looks like he's not going to arrive on time? Endurance, the faith. Can we trust God knowing that he's called us to something and then we deem it to be impossible? Can we trust it when it looks like he's not going to show up on time? Do we have the endurance? It's not about more faith. It's about more endurance. It's about not throwing in the towel. Next one is this. Our faith does not increase through addition, but through developing what we already have. Our faith does not increase through addition, but developing what we already have. This afternoon when I found out that I was going to be doing this and I started reading through Pastor Zach's notes, I was at home with my wife, Christy, and I started reading through all of these things, and I was just reading them out loud, and we were talking about this. And at first I was like, our faith does not increase through addition, but through developing what we already have. Like I had to think about that and sit on that for a moment. And Christy is just brilliant. She had this amazing illustration to help me. She's like, well, when a person is born, when a baby's born, their eyeball is the same size it's always going to be. Did you know that? I knew that, but she's sharing it. She's like, I feel like I learned that recently, though. That's not been a lifelong knowledge. So if you don't know, no fault of your own. I feel like I was like, oh yeah, I guess that is true. That's why babies' eyes look so huge, because their eyeball is fully developed when you're born. It's the eyeball size that you're going to have. It doesn't grow. She's like, but just because they have that eyeball and that size doesn't mean that they can see clearly, right? Because children have their sight has to develop. It's kind of blurry, probably a little black and white to begin with. I don't know, someone can Google that. But they don't really have, aren't they colorblind? I don't know. But their eyesight develops. That's why it's like they really can't see what you do. There's more of the voice and the hearing and the familiarity, because it takes a little bit of time for that vision, especially from far away, to develop. And she's like saying, so it's not about getting more eyeballs, right? It's not like we have to have more eyes to see. It's about developing what you already have. And so I was like, that is such a brilliant thing. She's like, you're born with a certain amount of muscle. You have that muscle, and it's not about getting more muscle. It's developing the muscles that you already have. It's exercising. It's putting the work. And so our faith doesn't increase through addition, saying, how do I figure out to get more faith? How do I build this up? How do I get pumped up? Instead, it's about developing what we already have. I learned this lesson, such a difficult way. I started bike riding during the pandemic. Actually, right before the pandemic hit, I started getting out on the trail and riding. Actually, Pastor Zach and another pastor friend of ours, Pastor Chris Mays, they both cycled quite a bit, and they invited me to go on a trail with them one day. True story. I was like, I haven't been on a bike since like elementary school. Like, I'm sure you don't forget, but it's just not something I had done much. So I actually had to borrow like this old mountain bike that probably weighed 300 pounds, and it just, prime condition. And so I get out there on the trail and I discovered that I kind of liked it, but I'm not going to lie to you, I got tired really quick. And I remember as a kid, like, no joke, we were visiting friends out of state, family, and they were like, we went to some park, national state park, I don't know what it was, and you could rent bikes. And they're like, it's a 5-mile ride. And I was like, walk across the United States? That sounds like a lot of fun, too. Like, who wants to do that? That's the dumbest thing I ever heard. 5 miles on a bike? There's no way. There's no way you could do this. And so slowly and surely I started riding on the bike, and honestly, when I first started riding, especially on that big old sweet mountain bike, no muscles for it, no lung capacity, I'm not like I'm working out a whole lot. I was like, this is hard work. I'm like, struggling to keep up with everyone, and it's like they're just talking up there, having a good time, conversation, and I'm like, I got this, guys. I'm coming to the rear. They're like, Brian, they were so gracious with me and patient, but I discovered it was something that I really liked, but I had to develop the endurance. I had to build the capacity. I had to have consistency to get on the trail. Not only that, I was very tempted to be like, ooh, now I can go out and get a bike. But I made myself ride that mountain bike forever because I was like, if I can't stick to it on this monstrosity, I'm not going to go out and get one. And so I did. I made myself ride it. I just put the time in, put the consistency, and now I can say that I ride a little more than 5 miles. Thank God, right? Usually average around 12 to 15 on a ride. I'll fit back through the fence, like spiritually. You just got to get them so spiritually fed that they're not going to leave the church. And he's like, what does that mean? That's kind of ridiculous. It's not being about so spiritually, over the top that you can't, then go out and fit out the door. The whole idea is to get invested into spiritually and then go out and do something with it. That you can go too far the other way, that you can just be spiritually totally malnourished, but you can be so totally nourishedly overstuffed that you're just not doing anything with the stuff that you've been invested into spiritually. My dad used to say this years ago, that you can be so heavenly minded, you can be of no earthly good. That's like this whole idea that you can just be so caught up in just seeking these things spiritually so much that you're missing out on all the life and opportunities and things that God's put in front of us and the opportunities that we do have to serve others and be his representation in his hands and his feet. So it's not one or the other. It's like so many things. I was talking to a friend of mine, Pastor Johnny Taplin. He's British. He lives down in Washington, PA, but he's from England. That's why he has the British accent. They don't have a British accent in Washington, which would be kind of cool. We were talking about this idea of like the pendulum, that so many things in this world, it's like everything swings all the way to one side or it swings to the other side, but so many times the health comes from it being in the middle, right? And it applies in so many areas. We're talking about this, and he's like, I have this book idea. And I was like, I have this book idea too. And so I really want to write a book with him, mostly because he has a British accent, and the book would just sound cooler. It's like Pastor John. It's amazing, but it's so true. We don't want to be one way or the other. We want to be spiritually fit. We want to have a balanced diet with exercise. The whole ideas of calories that you take in are the calories that you expend. And if you're being invested into and feeding yourself spiritually, you should be able to expend those spiritual calories, pour into other people, do those things, invest into your own spiritual life. And then you got to come and get filled up again. Your daily calorie intake is what your body needs every single day to function as a normal, healthy human being. And spiritually, we need a daily caloric intake spiritually to invest into ourselves and to expend that, rinse and repeat. And if it's about food, I'm there. Come on, somebody. It's all about, I'm ready. I think I got this verse for you. Let's see. I did. I got it. Not that I was putting this together as you guys were coming in. James 1, 2, and 4 says this: Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. For you know that your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow, for when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfected and complete, needing nothing. This is such a challenging verse. I mean, so many times when we follow after Jesus, I mean, let's just be honest. Our hope is that things are going to go well, and that we stand in the promises of God, and that we believe in faith that he's working all things for our good, right? And that we're going to experience that joy in life, and he's going to come through, and we'll have these breakthroughs. But then you get these little nuggets like this in James, and James is just littered full of all of them. When troubles come your way, consider it a great opportunity for great joy. It's like, that's cute and everything, but like when troubles come my way, I should be happy about it. Consider it joy. Shouldn't I be like praying? When trouble comes your way, you need to rebuke it and tell the devil to get behind you. No, it's not what he's saying. He's saying when troubles come your way, consider it great joy. Why? Because your faith is being tested, and it's a chance for your endurance to grow. It's like building that muscle. It's doing that exercise. It's riding the bike. It's whatever it is that you're putting the work in, you're building the endurance, and this is a good thing. It's like that good soil, not the other terrible soil, but the smelly thing, the thing that terrible that went in it that caused life to happen. And the same thing has happened when the troubles, when the test, when the random trial that punches you in the face on a Tuesday afternoon, and you're like Peter out of the boat and like, Jesus, help me. I need you. To consider it joy. Why? Because you have an opportunity for your endurance to grow, to be stretched. That it's not about more faith, it's about the endurance. It's about building it up. This is our final one, then we're going to close. Ellie, I don't know if you want to come back up, but we're going to finish with this point here. Circumstances can pull us away in fear or draw us closer to Jesus through faith. The circumstances that we face, the things that we see in our life, this is just like Peter. He stepped out of the boat. Did he keep his eyes on Jesus? No, which would have been real. And I love when we read these things, we just get so judgmental. I would have kept my eyes on Jesus. Well, first of all, I wouldn't even have got out of the boat. So Peter's already a point ahead of me because it is the natural thing to put your eyes on the obstacle and the thing that is holding you back. It is not natural to keep your eyes on Jesus. Why? Because we have to build that endurance to have that faith to keep our eyes on him. And the circumstances, the obstacles, the challenge, the difficulty, you fill in the blank for whatever it is, they can either push us away in fear or they can draw us closer to Jesus through faith. It's all about the perspective that we choose to take. I just want to be honest, that is not easy. That is not easy. Because when you're facing that wave, when you are sinking, when you are drowning, when you are frustrating, when you're at the end of your rope, when you don't know if you can do it again, it's like a broken record, and I've tried so many times, and you're facing it, it's so easy to just look at the obstacle, to look at the wave, to look at the thing and be like, Jesus, I knew you called me to this, but now it's just impossible. I'm just going to sink. I can't do this. I love the story in the Old Testament. The people of God, the Israelites, children of God, they're in Egypt, they're enslaved, they leave. God's got a promised land for them that they're going to go to. It's like flowing with milk and honey. The Bible's full of food analogies. I just can't wait for heaven. It's going to be good. But they're going to get to this place, and you might know the story. It goes really, really bad for them. They get lost in the wilderness. It's some pretty crazy stuff. And they finally, after many delays, get to where they're going. And so they send in some spies. They're like, hey, this is the land God has promised to us. Why don't you guys go take a look, come back and report and tell us what you think. And so you might be familiar with the story. Most of the spies come back and they're like, oh man, it's not good. They're giants and we're like grasshoppers in their sight. We are nothing. Woe is me. We're piddly. We're weak. They're going to crush us. They're going to destroy us. But there were two, Joshua and Caleb, who come out and they're like, we got this. Sure, we might be small in their sight, but that's the land that God gave us. And so we're going to go in there. We're going to take it. And the rest of them are like, no, these guys are crazy. They're out of their mind. They're young. They're inexperienced. If they just had more realism in their life, we're just keeping it real, bro. But they didn't. They had so much faith, not in their own ability. Their faith wasn't, well, yeah, we're grasshoppers, but we are just warrior grasshoppers. No, that's not what they're thinking at all. You know why they had faith? Because they're like, that's the land that God said is ours. And so our faith is not in our ability. Our faith is in that we're teeny and piddly and minuscule in their sight, and they could crush us easily with their might. Their faith was in God. Their faith was what God called them to. That's your land. Go take your land. Go conquer it. And so everyone else is seeing it and being like, there's no way. There's no way we can do this. Like, we got this. Not because we're awesome, because God called us to it. See, the question is, whose report will you believe? Will you believe what God has called you to? The question that we started with, what were you once so convinced God called you to that now you have deemed impossible? And I can't answer that for you. And maybe it is something big. I don't know. Maybe some of you got some big dreams, some big things that God's placed in your heart. Maybe it's something small and something you haven't thought about for a while and you just kind of let it go. You just let it dwindle. You've let it fade. It's something you haven't revisited in a long time. But I want to ask you this question as we close. Whose report are you going to believe? Are you going to build endurance with your faith and step out? And knowing that even if you do step out in faith, here's what's so wonderful. Just to take it all the way back to where we started. Don't you love that Peter had the faith to step out of the boat? And even when his eyes went to the circumstance, even when his eyes went to the situation, even when he took his eyes off Jesus, Jesus was like, well, wish you'd had more faith. Have a nice swim. He reaches out right where he's at. Friends, don't let the faith that you have, thinking the endurance that I've got to build, and maybe I'll step out and maybe I'll fall and maybe you will, but know that Jesus will be there to pick you up. Not with judgment, not with malice, not telling you should just had more faith. Why did you doubt? Do we doubt like those spies who were sent in because our eyes are on ourselves and our circumstance and our ability and our strength? Been around for a little bit now in these 40-some years. I have learned, I've learned so many times that it's not about me. It's not about my own strength, my own ability. Boy, I try to make it about it. In my marriage, in my parenting, in the ministry God's called me to do, in the day-to-day, I've got this. But instead, taking my eyes off of myself, putting them on Jesus, keeping our eyes on the author of our faith. Friends, let's build endurance. And in 2024, let's begin to step out again and believe those things that God has placed in our hearts. Those dreams, those relationships, the marriages, the families, the children, whatever it is, the job, the calling, the home, whatever it is that God's placed inside of your heart, the things that he's called you to do that we now deem impossible are possible because of who God is. Lord, we thank you. We thank you that you are a God of the impossible. And Lord, I pray for every single person who is here tonight and watching online. God, those who might feel that tug, and maybe it stings a little bit. Maybe it's numb and indifferent. Maybe it's like an old familiar thought or feeling that we've just buried deep inside. But God, I just pray that in this year, God, that you would give us enduring faith. God, to not despise those trials and difficulties that we go through, but to count it as joy to know that we have an opportunity to grow in our faith and our endurance. Lord, I pray for each and every one of us, Lord, that we would have the faith to step out of the boat. Lord, keeping our eyes on you, not putting our eyes on ourselves and everything that we can accomplish and doing in our own strength, but recognizing that we are in desperate need of you. God, investing into ourselves spiritually. Growing in our faith and our endurance. In Jesus' name, amen.